Hey, what's up YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Rory Reid, aka Tripler999, and today our video is going to be titled How to Paint a Cherry. It's going to be about a 45-minute long tutorial from start to finish, showing you all the steps. If you're a beginning acrylic painter, this is going to be a great video for you. And also, if you have any questions or comments about the video, be sure to leave them in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to answer them in the next video or reply to you right back in the comments. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Hope you guys like the video. Enjoy. Alright guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going over how to paint a cherry. Today's objective will be to paint this little 5x5 canvas fast, quick, and somewhat easy. If you have painting experience, this should be easy for you. If you're a beginner, will be a little bit challenging, but you know, stick with the video and you'll come out with a good result, guaranteed. Using one of those cheap paint packs that someone gave me. You know, when people find out you paint, they buy any little easel or brushes or paint that they can find. So I'm using one of those cheap little multi-packs. This one is from Wonder and Wise, and we're going to use this for this YouTube tutorial / demonstration. And right now you see I'm laying out some colors. I have titanium white, and in this pack primary magenta, quinacridone scarlet is the next reddish color you see there, third from the left. The fourth will be a cad yellow medium, and yeah, this using these paints was new for me. I've never used this brand before, and so I wanted to, you know, test them out. And as I said before, we have a little small canvas. This is a 5x5, so really small, and always a good way to, you know, test out new supplies, new materials that you get on a smaller scale, so you don't waste a lot of time or materials, because as you know, the hobby / profession of painting is very expensive. The next color I just added is a primary yellow from the Wonder and Wise brand. Then we moved on to a phthalocyanine emerald is what they call it, a green color. And then we moved on to a dark ultramarine blue. And the final color I'm going to add later on in the video is a Mars black, and we'll use that to drop down the tones somewhat as the video goes on. Alright, using, as you can see, my brushes there, I have a medium-sized flat brush, a small filbert brush, a liner brush, and number 1 round brush, I believe it is. The brushes don't really matter, and you know, paint doesn't really matter. If you don't have these exact colors, just use something that's similar. The video is pretty clear, so you can see the, you know, colors there laid out on the palette. So just grab something similar that you have, and should work fine. We're not getting super technical for this piece. We are aiming for a slight realism, but not really. And we're just gonna try to make a beautiful painting when it's all said and done. Alright, usually when I start out any like kind of still life work, I try to get a nice background color filled in first. I just feel like it helps with setting a baseline for the rest of the painting. I, you know, get it to the right tone, the color, whichever color I'm using. Here I grab some of the primary magenta, little bit of the cad yellow orange hue, and touch of the black, touch of the blue, and we got a nice sort of maroon color that came out, and we're just gonna freely spread that in the background to cover up the white canvas. This is the first layer, so Don't worry too much about, you know, where the paint's going. Just slap it on there. We're just covering up the white space, adding our first initial layer. And as you can see, my brush strokes are all over the place, up, down, left, right, side to side. You want to, you know, create a nice mesh and a nice weave. When you go over it with a second layer using the same technique, you'll get a nice varied background that will be pleasing to the eye, you know. And usually at the beginning of paintings is when you have the most freedom, because things aren't really defined yet, and you know, you just get to use your creative expression to just freely spread the paint around. And now you see I'm grabbing some more of the primary magenta and the cad yellow orange, and a touch of the black as well, just mixing up some more of that same color to put on the background again, to go over it some more, cover up the remaining white spots and spaces. I was using a picture reference for this. I always do recommend using a picture reference, especially if you're doing like a still life. We're not going to copy the reference exactly because we're not really going for full-on realism, but the reference is nice because it gives you an idea of where, you know, your shadows, midtones, highlights goes, give you a general shape of the object you're painting, and you know, gives you a concept of lighting for the piece, which always works out best, as opposed to just, you know, going off the top of your head. You always want to do a bit of planning before you start a painting. Of course, that's not the rule. That's just my personal preference. Especially when I began painting, it really helped a lot to add some direction to my pieces. So I just found a random cherry picture on Google, and that's what I'm using to determine the, you know, the shape, lighting, etc. Alright, so we went over the background a little bit more, and as you can see, the white space is being covered up a lot more, and it looks more pleasant already. So we grabbed some more of the primary yellow, went back into that same background color, and now we have a lighter tone of that same color that we're going to fill in some of the foreground with. Now we are aiming to have our light source towards the right hand side of the painting, coming from the foreground a bit. So on the left side, what I'm painting now is the same background color, but it's gonna be a little lighter than the actual background that you can see at the top of the piece. And that's a key element of painting, is being able to distinguish between your shadows, highlights, and the tones in between, your midtones. That's what gives your objects, you know, its three-dimensional shape. That's what adds depth, distance to your pieces. So it's always good to have a nice tonal range in your piece, from your darkest darks to your lightest lights. A good solid contrast. And again, the same type of brush strokes, kind of making like an X mark up and down, side to side, keeping the strokes varied, because as I said, the purpose of that is to create a nice mesh for when you add your second, third layers. It really comes together well by the time you get to the detail phase of your paintings. Again, this is just my personal style, my personal preference. Some people don't paint that way, but that's all right. That's the beauty of painting. You can freely express yourself however you see fit. So now I determined that we still wanted to go a bit darker in the background, so we got a touch of the ultramarine blue, dipped it into the Mars black, and took some of the original background color that we mixed, and we're now going over the background with a third layer, just dropping down that tonal range, or the value, just dropping it down even more, so we get like a nice deep dark maroon color. You don't ever want to really drop your values with black alone, because it creates like a very flat effect on your paint, on your pieces. It's always good to, you know, add like a drop of purple, drop of red, whatever color that meshes well with your overall color scheme. So for this piece, the ultramarine blue helped to offset that flat black color, and then you mix that with the background maroon color, and you get a nice darker value. And now you can see the background is a lot more separated from the foreground, which is what we wanted. So now we grabbed our filbert brush, and we're gonna mix some paint for the actual cherry itself. For this we used the quinacridone scarlet and did a touch of the cad yellow medium to lighten it a bit, and we're working on the right side of the cherry to you know, that's the side our light source is coming from, so we wanted to keep that bright. Again, this is the first layer, so don't worry too much about it. Just want to get a light color on the right to show that that's where our light source is coming from. And then as we get towards the left side of the cherry, we're going to drop down the value again a bit to add a sense of three-dimensionality. And as you can see, we're doing that now, and we're keeping it slightly lighter than the background itself. And it's always good to, you know, put a little bit of your foreground color into your background color along the edges. Creates a nice effect where you know, gives the illusion that the object is in the space you're painting, as opposed to, you know, cut and paste it on top of the background. That's a neat little trick you could do. So yeah, usually when people draw their sketches out, you know, they try to keep everything inside the lines. And I did that too when I began, but you know, as the years went by, I figured out not really necessary to do that. Just paint freely, and you'll get a much more effective result. More pleasing to the eye, I think, too. So just paint freely. Don't worry about going over the edge, that kind of thing. Just get your color that you're going to use and just put it on the canvas. Because the beauty about painting too is that you can always paint over it, fix any mistakes, and that's actually an essential step into making good work. You paint freely at the start, you tighten it up towards the middle, and then you fix your mistakes and detail towards the end is usually the workflow I use myself. Alright, we grabbed some of the background color and we lightened it up a bit with the primary magenta and the quinacridone scarlet, which is the lighter red color. And we dropped in a little shadow underneath the cherry there to the left side, as you can see that we're putting it in now. And just adds another quick little dimension to the piece to have a nice shadow in there. Oh, and I failed to mention I am using acrylic paint, so what you saw there was I have a spray bottle that I usually use just to keep the canvas and the palette wet, because as you know, acrylic paint does dry fairly quickly, so it's always good to have a little mister on the side to just keep the palette as wet as you want and the canvas itself as wet as you want, so you're able to move your paint around and blend it a bit easier. Don't spray too much. As you saw, I just sprayed like twice to just add a little mist over the top. Helps with the blending, especially at the start of the piece. You don't want to spray too much water on it, because then your paint will run off and you'll reveal the white canvas below again. But usually after you apply 1 or 2 coats and it dries all the way through, you're able to freely spray as much water as you can once your initial layer is set into the canvas itself. Alright, so now we grab some of our cyanide emerald is what they call it, and just the green color, and a little bit of the primary yellow, and we're mixing a light green color which we're going to use for the leaf there on the cherry. And yeah, general rule of thumb when you're painting any sort of object, if you're a beginner, just decide on whatever color you're going to use for your midtones, which is the general color of the object, and then just paint a darker value of mix a darker value of that and then a lighter value of that. So the darker value you use for your shadows, the midtones will be the original mixture, and then the highlights or the lighter values in the painting will be the lighter mixture you make. That's always a good starting tip. As you get more experience, it becomes a bit more complicated than that. But when you're starting, if you want your paintings to look a lot better, mix the color, darken it down for your shadows, lighten it up for your highlights, and those 3 things will give you a good sense of 3-dimensionality on anything you're painting. So here I'm using the original mixture I made for the leaf. The mid-tone is fairly light color, and as we go along, you're gonna see that I'm gonna darken it down and lighten it up. So on the left side of the leaf, left side of the stem, we're gonna add our shadows. And on the right side of each, we're gonna leave some of that lighter green color and even add some lighter values than what we already have here just to bring out that 3D effect. And as you can see at this point in the piece, the cherry doesn't even really look like a cherry yet. We have a general shape, some general shadows, etc. Don't panic. We're gonna get there. I see a lot of beginning painters that often, stop right here, or they get to this stage and like, oh, it's ugly, not feeling it, and they quit. There's an ugly stage to every painting, unless you're like a master. So don't just ignore this. We're gonna keep painting. Everything is gonna come together towards the end. So at this point the canvas is still fairly dry, so what I'm doing now is going over the leaf with a second layer of the green, and I have a little bit of the darker green mixture there, so I'm going over that with the second layer. And the reason you want to always paint in layers is because when you put the paint on the white canvas, some of that white color actually shows through, so it doesn't give a true representation of the mix. You want to add a second layer and even a third, and that will give the true color that will be much closer to what you have on your palette, as opposed to just putting one layer on the white canvas, if that makes sense. So you should never judge your painting off the first layer. Always mix again, fine-tune your values, and add second, third layers as you see fit. Alright, so here we begin to work on the body of the cherry once again. We allowed a little bit of time for the first layer to dry, so now we're coming back in. We're going to fine tune our shadows, we're going to fine tune our midtones, and bring up the highlights a bit, just to define that shape a bit more as well. So we got some of the Mars black, some of the ultramarine blue, going back into that red color, and just dropping in some mid-tones towards the right side here and towards the top, because we want to give it that spherical shape. And towards the left side, we're even getting the shadows even darker, blending it into the background as well. Give it that illusion that it's disappearing into the background somewhat. And it's at this stage in the painting where the reference really, earns its keep. It's you're constantly checking the reference, seeing where the shadows fall, seeing where the midtones are, and again, like I said, you're not trying to copy it exactly, but it's giving you a general idea of what it's supposed to look like. And if you get anything close to that, you'll have a good enough painting on your hands. Alright, so after working the cherry for another 3 to 4 minutes there, you see we're a bit closer and a bit better off than where we were initially. And that's sort of the workflow of painting. You know, you want to chip away at it, you want to mold it, sculpt it as you go little by little. And over time, if you check your reference and pay attention, you'll get something that's, you know, very satisfactory. Still doing a bit more work, still defining. This is kind of what the I guess you'd call a detail phase. What I'm doing for the cherry now is just darkening the darks or the shadows and lightening the lights, and then defining the subtleties in between. As close to the reference as we can get. And as you can see, this is a very measured process. Little by little, it's taking shape. It's looking more and more like a cherry as we go. And that's all from what we just described, with checking the reference and, you know, defining our shadows, defining our midtones, defining our highlights. Towards the end, we're going to drop in our brightest little highlight, and that should really put the piece over the top prior to that point, what you're doing now is, you know, I guess you could consider it just shadows and midtones. Towards the end, we're going to drop in our brightest little highlight on the right side where our light source is coming from, and that should, you know, be the final touch in essence of the piece. But yeah, to create something like this is not really difficult. Just knowing a few basic principles, you know, anyone can do this and get like a very nice result. Something you can hang up in your kitchen or your room, wherever. It's a cool little piece, man. And again, just some commentary on the paints. Like I said, this was from Wonder and Wise in one of those big variety pack things that you guys know what I'm talking about. It's one of those variety packs that you can find in like retail stores. And yeah, the paint was okay to use. It is a little transparent for my taste, but you know, to get around that issue, you just use more paint and apply more layers. But yeah, if you're doing something as far as like a quick study, or you know, a painting that you're not going to sell like for a friend or whatever, these are pretty good. It wasn't the best, wasn't the worst. They were, you know, pretty decent to use. I don't mind them. Alright, so as you can see, we mixed up a little bit of our cad yellow orange, a little bit of the primary yellow, which is the lightest yellow on the palette you see there, and we dropped in a touch of titanium white and blended it in with the foreground color to the lower right of the painting there, just to bring it up a notch. As I said, this is what you do towards the end. You define your shadows and highlights and just fine tune everything. So now you can see, just by adding the little light touches in the foreground there, the cherry stands out even more from the background. You have a clear separation from the foreground and the background. And towards the left side of the cherry where the shadow is, it's sort of even indistinguishable. Going from the you know, the background into the shadows on the cherry itself. And here you see now I begin to start dropping in the brightest highlight on the entire piece. And as I said, these paints were a bit transparent or translucent, so it's going to be a process to get that highlight up to where it needed to be. And again, to get around that, you just, you know, add some paint, let it dry, add some more, let it dry until it's where you want it. So now we mix some more of the shadow color, and what I'm doing at this point now is trying to define the actual shape of the cherry a bit more, just to get it looking, you know, where we need it. Did a little spray on the canvas as well, just so we can get our paint to move around a bit more freely. Allows us to blend on the canvas a bit easier. And here we grabbed our liner brush, and we're just going to go add some highlights to that right side of the stem there, just to better define where our light source is coming from. And you never want to do like a full line like you see there now. I did that initially just to get a clear definition, but we're going to go back in there with some of the mid and shadow green color to break up that clear line definition. As the painting goes along, you'll see that gives it a more natural look overall. There you see I'm smudging some parts out with my finger and going over the shadows again, bringing it forward from the left side of that stem to the right side, just to break up the clear highlight line. There you see me doing now, and you get a more natural look going. Some of it's getting lost in the background, which is fine. Just little tips you could do to make the painting look a bit more realistic. And again, these are paints that we use right out of the tube. So to have the painting look this good, just by doing that, it's, you know, a statement in and of itself. Usually, what you do before, if you're really going for like a realism look, is you would take some time prior to painting and mix your colors exactly to your reference. And you know, you take an hour and a half, whatever, to mix all those colors and get them to match as closely as possible to your reference, and then you put them on the canvas, and then you'd have a more realism style painting. But for the purpose of this tutorial, we'll just put our paintings on the palette right out of the tube and just did quick mixing as we went along. And I think the result is pretty decent so far. And also you can see the effects of doing our brush strokes in the X motion and the random brush strokes. Once you get that third layer on, it all comes together beautifully, and when you step back from it, you know, your eyes blend all those brushstrokes together and you get a great effect. Now we're adding some highlights to the right side of that leaf, just to distinguish it from the left side, which is going to be in shadow. And again, these are just very loose brushstrokes. For this tutorial, I just wanted to keep everything loose. If I was doing this again for sale or something to that effect, I would, after I got done with this stage, I would, you know, take a couple liner brushes or smaller brushes and go over everything again, adding, you know, fine-tuning a couple lines, adding more detail with the liner brush, etc. That additional step would smooth everything out to give you a more photorealistic look, but again, it's all preference. If you're not into that, then having the loose brush strokes as you have at this stage is completely fine as well. Still just fine-tuning the shadows and midtones on the cherry itself. Paying attention to its relationship to the background. You don't want it as dark as the background, but in the shadow areas of the cherry, you want it close. And then a gradual increase in the value as you turn towards the light source. And once you get to this stage in a painting, it's, you know, just up to personal preference how far you want to go. You can keep painting this for another hour, 2 hours to get it even more realistic. You can mix some more paint and, you know, cross-reference it with the reference picture and add another layer and get the colors to match exactly. You could stop here if you want. You know, it's all personal preference. What do you want to portray? What do you want to express with the painting? It's personal preference, and you do as you see fit. So I think here is where I decided to leave it. Took us about 45 minutes or so, and you know, the end result was pretty good. We were able to work fairly quickly, and got a painting that is, you know, a bit above average. I would say you have clear contrast from your darks to your lights. Is a nice quick painting that I think anybody could do, even a beginner, and you know, they'd be pleased with the end result, which is the aim of this video and this tutorial, I'd say. So, you know, nice relaxing piece. Could do this on the weekend when you got some free time to just chill, knock out a quick painting. Zoomed in here a bit so you can see it a little bit closer, and yeah, nice little piece, man. I was happy with it. Alright, so there you have it, folks. That was our tutorial on how to paint a cherry. I hope that video was educational for you, and you learned something from it. If so, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated. That helps us out a lot. And also, if you have any questions relating to the painting, go ahead and leave that in the comment section below, and I'll get to them when I get a chance. Also, be sure to follow me on social media at Tripler999 on Instagram and Twitter. I'll have links in the description below. And other than that, I hope you guys have a great day. I'll be sure to drop more videos on the channel for your enjoyment. Look forward to seeing you back here in the future. It's your boy Trip, and I'm out. Peace.